All right, so does everyone remember when I had taught you that Bethany was approximately how many miles from Jerusalem? Who remembers? 2 miles. It's about 2 miles from Jerusalem, okay? And so by Jesus going to Bethany at all is considered insane before this situation by his own disciples. Do y'all remember that? So it's even more dangerous now for Jesus to show up in Bethany, which is only 2 miles from Jerusalem, than when his disciples before were scared. So do you believe that his disciples might be a little bit scared now that there's an official word of reporting and arresting about Jesus' appearance within Jerusalem? So the stakes are even higher now. And so, of course, Jesus is not afraid of man. And the first thing he does is, you know what? I feel like visiting my friend Lazarus. And so it says that Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, all right? Remember it said, what do they do before the Passover? Why do some people come early? So that they can go through a cleansing ritual when they show up. So he's not getting put off his schedule and the way he does things in any bit at all. Jesus, right at the right time, does what? He heads to do his religious duties before God and will not let anything, even the fear of his own death, stop him from performing what is right before God and the law that he has set down. He will not be moved in any way. And so he shows up and it says that he went to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom he had raised from the dead. And it says that Martha, now notice the characterization of these people. Martha, it says that, and they had a supper for him there, but it says Martha was serving. Okay, what do we already know about Martha? Who remembers the stories of Martha and Mary back when all of this was beginning? This fits the very character of Martha in that the original scenario when they came across each other was that while Jesus was teaching, her sister, Mary, was sitting at the feet of Jesus, hanging out with all the guys, really, absorbing the teachings of Jesus, while Martha was doing all of the cleaning and all of the serving and stuff like that. And remember, she came to Jesus and said, Jesus, do something about Mary. She's being a lazy bum. I'm doing everything here. And Jesus, of course, turned to her and said, she's chosen the better thing. She's got me here. She's listening to my teachings. Now, every time we show up with Martha and Mary, I do not know why, but if you open up your mind to see the patterns of what God does in Scripture, remember that scenario that I just talked about, where he basically said to her, when I am present, I am the primary thing. Even good things do not compare. Because it would be good for, someone to be clean and tidy and all these different things. Those are good things. But even those things that are part of our world that we think are good about us, that we do and we perform on a daily basis, they are not nearly as important as obedience to Christ. Learning from God's Word. And so now you're going to see in this scenario, when Judas, and we'll get to it, Judas will step up, we'll have that concept taken up to an even bigger level here in just a second. That there's someone who says, here is something that is really good, that should be done, and it's not being done. But then Jesus' response will be, in my presence, I'm the only thing that matters, so any of those secondary goods are tiny compared to my presence. You see, there's a lady among all of them who is the dog who always gets kicked. And what's her name? Mary. Mary was scolded in front of Jesus, through her sister Martha, about not being a server. And now here in a little bit, Judas is going to step up and bully Mary as well. Why do you all suppose that Mary might be a target of bullying very easily for people? We don't know exactly for sure, But there is a tradition that says she may have been the woman who was a prostitute. We don't know that for sure, but it appears that that character may have been Mary, which would have made her the person who would have been, obviously Jesus would change her life, but she would have been the low person socially on the totem pole. And so it was very easy. And I hope that most of y'all already know this, but women did not carry a whole lot of weight in first century Palestine. And it's amazing that they carry so much weight among the companions of Jesus. It was really staggering compared to what it was everywhere else. But so we see there's nobody lower in Palestine in terms of, well, a woman's low enough in Palestine, and you know what the lowest of all women is? The prostitute. We don't know that that's her, but it could be the reason why she's a target all the time. So, but anyway, it says that Martha was serving. And now it seems appropriate that she's serving. And it says this, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with Jesus. Think about this. A man who had been resurrected is the kind of guy who hangs out with Jesus. Now, I'm going to tell you the key to this whole passage is the image of Lazarus. The image of Lazarus is you. Everyone who's saved, if that's you, the image here, the analogy, Lazarus represents you. You are the one who is raised up with Christ from the dead, who now sups with him and dines with Jesus in a casual manner. And that is now your life. And you're not hidden from anyone's view. You are out there shown to everyone to be this resurrected person. And it already says that people were coming from Jerusalem and the areas around to come see who? Lazarus, not just Jesus, to see Lazarus. And so you are this person who's exposed out there, and your relationship with Jesus is seen by all. And what they see is a man who's been raised from the dead, who's in the presence of Jesus on a daily basis. But then it comes into this beautiful story here where it says, then Mary. Potentially, Mary may have been an unusually sinful woman for that time. All of us are sinful. She may have carried an extra stigma that many of us don't carry. But what happens here, it says that Mary, okay, I have sisters. And let me just use a little bit of what I know about women. Sure, what I'm going to tell you is a bunch of stereotypes. But you know what? You know how some things become stereotypes? Because often they're true. And in my sisters and my extended female relatives, sometimes you can spot these different characteristics. I can spot Marthas in my family, in my extended family. I can spot Marys in my family, in my extended family. The image I get when I look at Martha and Mary is that Martha is that domestic diva. You know, she's the one looking up new recipes. She's the one who's making sure that she has the doily just right on the coffee table, and she has the coasters out so that the slobs won't come over here and put stains on their coffee table and things like that. Do any of y'all know a Martha? Very much that way. Matter of fact, they're almost so giving in terms of this service type of mentality, of this nesting type of mentality, that sometimes they don't have time for themselves. And that's not good to have no time for yourself. Mary apparently seems to be the other way. Mary, it sure was easy for her to quickly stop serving and start listening to Jesus. And it appears that Mary has at hand a lot of very expensive perfume, is what she has. And the image I get here is that one is very much about a little bit of surrounding herself with her feminine, wonderful little products and whatnot. She's not so much the domestic one. She is more about being the girly one. Does anyone kind of have people like this in your family? Well, what we have here is she somehow also has a lot of money, because it says that, and she took an entire pound of very costly perfume, which is pure nard, or your translation may say spikenard. That's the old phrase for it. Have any of you ever smelled spikenard or nard? All right. Well, I used to have this buddy. He's all, God bless him. It's not the way I approach it, but everything to him is about trying to be as Jewish-y as possible. Does anyone know somebody like that, a Christian? And everything's got to be as Jewish as possible, you know? They prefer the worship to have a shofar blowing all the time. And it's got to be in an E minor key to sound like a bunch of old Jewish songs. And they're not even Jewish, but everything's got to be real Jewish. And they're just you can tell they're just dying to put on a prayer shawl when it's time to pray and stuff like this. Well, this guy was my guy who just, all things needed to be super Jewish. And he always had all these interesting little trinkets. And he'd be like, would you like to know what nard smells like? And sure enough, he would show up and he'd have pure nard. So I could smell the nard. Well, it smells great. It smells great. Now, this morning, I slapped on probably the cheapest aftershave that's ever been created. I think it's Clubman Bay Rum. Okay, slap it on. It feels like I set my face completely on fire. And even the good odor of it is probably gone in about 15 minutes. And if I want to smell good again, I'd have to slap it back on. Okay? We can do this in this day and age. But culturally, what we understand about odor is totally different now than back in the first century Palestine. In first century Palestine, nobody got to smell good without paying a ton of money. Back then was a rough, primitive world. And it only took gobs of money to get you to not stink. So we should be thankful that we live in a day and age like this, okay? And so for her to have this, and now what I'm going to say about how much this stuff cost will make some sense to you. The cost of this very costly nard is going to be brought up here in a second by Judas. He's going to reveal, because Judas is the kind of guy who always knows how much money something costs. All right? He's very money-minded. Matter of fact, he even had a specific price that he put on Jesus' life at one time. He saw that Jesus' life to him was worth about 30 pieces of silver. He was one of these people that everywhere he looked, he put a price on everything, because for him, really what it was is that there was a price for him all the time, that he would do anything. So this is what is fixing to happen. It says that she took this. It's very expensive, and she had a whole pound of this. So she clearly couldn't use it all up just in this one moment. And it says that she began to anoint Jesus' feet with this, and she wiped his feet with her hair. And in the house, the fragrance of the perfume went through the entire house. So it'd be like right now, if I was to spill so much of my cologne that you would smell it back there in the fellowship hall. Okay, the idea from it being able to be smelled throughout the entire house is this. She overdid it. That's the idea. She overdid her expression of her love for Jesus. Everyone knows this was a total waste of money. She way overdid it. But that's the whole point. Do you see her mannerisms? She goes low towards his feet, and she pulls down her hair. And I don't know about you, and this is another stereotype of women, and particularly with my wife, there's certain things you don't mess with, and that's a woman's hair. I've seen both my sisters grow their hair out long, and then they get it cut really short, and I watch them. They had talked about getting this wonderful haircut for about 3 weeks, and then I see them sitting in the living room in front of some soap operas weeping with their fingers in their hair that they had cut all that beautiful hair off. And even though they look fantastic, the bottom line is, I don't even think that they can explain to me why they're weeping at the loss of their hair. Is there a woman here who has ever cried from a haircut? It's okay to tell if you have. All right, well then maybe you women are hardcore here, because if my sisters were here, they would tell you that they cried after almost every haircut. Particularly my sister Gina, who had hair that came down to here and was talked into a haircut by her older sister Anna. And she got it cut to here, and I saw her weep for about an hour because her hair had been that long for years since she was a little girl. My wife, I know better than to mess with her hair at certain times. Particularly, I enjoy putting my fingers in her hair to give her a big old kiss. And I have gotten punched in the chest several times by trying to do this before. You certainly do not do that to my wife. And then I imagine this woman, and you know what I've never seen a woman do? I've never seen a woman adore me so much that she removes my sandals or my shoes or whatever, takes off my stinky athletic socks, pulls her hair out, and puts perfume that we're fixing to find out is worth a year's worth of salary on my feet, and rip her hair out and treat it like it is so worthless that it's on the level of a rag that you would scrub your dishes with. The picture that is being painted here is the magnitude of the willingness to humble and lose everything at just one moment to be able to hold Jesus' feet in her hands, to make him know that she appreciates him. Now, the reason she's doing this is because he raised her brother from the dead. And you would do the same thing if you truly had a heart. Think of someone who you've lost in your life, someone who's died recently in your family that you loved. What would you be willing to lose to have them back? So, we'll discuss that. Judas suddenly says this. It says Judas, who was one of the disciples who had plans to betray him, said, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii? That's a modern translation will say that. 300 denarii and the money given to poor people. Now, it's fascinating that he has a number upon it so fast. 300 denarii, I looked it up, is about 11 months' wages. All right, so let's just call that a year's salary. I looked up last night, what is the average salary in Oklahoma? The average salary in Oklahoma is $50,000. Slightly under it, around 49 something. So imagine someone just blowing $50,000 to make your feet smell good. Now, on top of it, now imagine someone who will not even go back to church because they didn't like the way someone said hello to them. How much are we willing to endure to press towards service towards Christ? How far are you willing to humble? How far are you willing to lose? How far are you willing to be a humiliation to yourself? She used to sit at the feet of Jesus. And I want to ask you this. How far are you willing to press just to know God's word? Because here is often a lot of modern preachers, and I've heard it since I was a child, a lot of modern preachers will take this passage right here and they will use this to try to manipulate you into some kind of more giving or more service at their church. Has anyone heard anything like that from this passage? I have. Because they'll talk about the extravagant nature that she was willing to give up on behalf of Christ. And somehow Christ is always in their mind an analogy for the church. And that's not what the analogy here is. So if you want to do more at the church, that's great. If you want to give more to the church, that's great. But that's not what this passage is talking about. This passage is about whatever it is that is the distance you have to travel to giving all to Christ, you must give everything. Break bones, cut off hands, pluck out eyes, whatever is needed to travel from point A to point B. Jesus didn't intend that people really need to pluck out their eyes to keep from going to hell, or chop off their hands or their feet to keep from going to hell. But what he was saying is, whatever is needed to the extreme, you must act in the extreme on behalf of Christ. And that's all that this is really showing is. I remember one time, I felt like I was supposed to give something very valuable to somebody. And it was someone I didn't like at all. I really did not like them. I really did not like them. And I felt like the Lord told me to give them the most valuable thing I had. It's a good thing back then I was really poor, so it wouldn't have been too great of a loss. But I knew what it was. I had the complete volumes of my favorite author, Francis Schaeffer, volumes 1 through 5. I don't think there's a 6, maybe there is. I had the complete volumes. I kept feeling, every time I saw them, that God wanted me to give that to them, because that was the thing that was closest to my heart. And I would like to be able to tell you that I was an awesome Christian, and I finally gave in, and I gave that to him, and God blessed me, and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't. To this day, I feel a heavy spot in my heart that I did not do what Christ said, all because of I had a bitterness towards them. And I don't know what kind of blessing there would have really been if I had truly given that to them. But so, just to help you understand what Mary did a little bit, I want you to imagine, what is the thing closest to your heart that you have? To her, it was probably this big pound of perfume. What would you be willing to lose for Christ? I'm not saying that you need to lose that for Christ right now, but for her, it was the right thing to do, and here's why. When you're overwhelmed with the concept that your brother came back from the dead, it's almost like, why not? Why not do this? What would you withhold from this man? And she wanted Christ to know that she would withhold nothing from him. And you need to be the type of person that you would withhold nothing from Christ to serve him. And so, but Judas, of course, Judas has the number upon it, and he says, yeah, that's about a year's wages that we could have given to the poor. Now, on the other side of it, we have the dark side of this passage, where it also describes people who are also in the church. In this passage, we have someone who, under the cloak of doing some great work, is really having another desire that they want filled. And what they're presenting towards you, and they find an easy target here in Mary, is to be able to be critical of this situation, and it looked quite noble. And really, it was just because of this, not because he was considerate of the poor, but because he used to hang on to the money purse, or some translations will say the money box, and he would pilfer from whatever was in there. He was a thief. And so what he could see there is, all he could see was the potential of what he could have had for his agenda through the avenue of religious things. And so what we have here is, you notice that people will try to put forth some kind of thing that is supposed to sound good, which is really for evil, and it's part of control. But Jesus kind of puts him down and says, let her alone so that she can keep it, so that she can have it for my burial. And that's what this was really leading towards. And she was perceptive of that. And Jesus kind of turned it on Judas in such a way that it would be embarrassing for Judas to keep pressing this. Because in the Jewish culture, to provide something like expensive perfume for a burial was very serious, and it was what you properly did. And so Jesus tied what she did. He said, no, here's what we're going to do. This is just the beginning of my walk towards the grave. And she's going to save the rest of this, and we're not, because basically Judas was saying, and sometimes you haven't heard this preached, Judas was saying, before she uses up all of it, let's take the rest of it and sell it. And at least we'll get some more money out of it, because what she's doing is wrong. So he still thought there was a chance that he would still get some money out of it. And Jesus put a stop to that, knowing his intentions, and said, no, 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 no. She needs to hang on to this because I'm fixing to die. And she will need this because it's proper that as Jews, we put something like this upon a dead body. And once he says that, Judas had to back off because he didn't mess with the concept of the burial to the Jews. But after that, it basically says that then Jews were coming to visit them, and they weren't coming to just see Jesus, but they're also coming to see Lazarus. But that the high priest had already planned that they would also murder Lazarus because people were coming to believe in Jesus all because of the existence of Lazarus. And I'll just close with this. It's a very simple concept. The value of Christ to the high priest and Judas as opposed to the value of Christ to Mary. Mary valued the life of her brother so much that she also valued Christ. The high priest hated Jesus so much that they had no value upon the life of Lazarus, that even though he was raised from the dead, they would want to kill him. Now, I want to show you the insanity of this right quick. If God raises a man from the dead, what situation are you going to be in if you plan to murder that same man? And this is where it comes back around, kind of full circle to what I told you. Lazarus represents you. Because of your connection with Jesus, what is due Jesus will wind up being targeted towards you. And so they initially said, we're going to kill Jesus, and then they realized it's not good enough to just kill Jesus. We have to kill those who have been raised with him. That's you. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.